announcement about China's new map. That's what.
August 28th, 2023, the Chinese government released a map. The map did a surprisingly good job at making a lot of other countries angry.
Several countries have rejected China's new standard map.
It's a violation of the law. So that's where I put that map.
The release of this map also was met with a huge event and announcement within China. This featured the state
Occupying the territories or something.
media launching into a commentary on the importance of maps,
地图是国家版图最主要的表现形式。
followed by a warning to the people that maps that have errors can cause, quote, great harm to society.
危害了我们祖国的这个统一。
So let's look at what's going on with this map, why countries around the region are condemning it, and why China had to go to such great lengths to tell people that there's nothing wrong with these maps, and that in fact, a map like this is key to national unity. To do this, I'm going to need a high-res version of this map. Luckily, the Chinese government has me covered.
地图是国家版图最主要的表现形式。
发布了矢量地图，更好地满足专业用户。
I want to show you what this map says, and show you how China uses cartography to assert and project power in its region. Because as clean as this map looks, within it, there's actually a lot going on. Border tug-of-wars, fake islands, a 10th dash on a line in the ocean, barbed wire-wrapped clubs, and proxy wars. It's the perfect example of how maps aren't just maps. They're tools of national power.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't like the feeling of being spied on, and the government of China wants their country to look like this. But in reality, it looks a lot more like this. We're gonna move left to right, from India to Taiwan and the South China Sea.
What's the
By
red,
the way,
yellow
the Chinese
one?
government requires its map makers to use this algorithm that intentionally scrambles the latitude and longitude coordinates of their maps, all in the name of national security. This makes it hard for people like me to work with Chinese maps. But we were able to hack through these maps and line them up with our own mapping systems, which is how we're able to make this video. Okay, with that, let's get started. First, we have Kashmir, a region that is already heavily disputed between India and Pakistan. The map shows that all of this section is a part of China, and indeed, China controls it. But India claims that this actually belongs to them. It's the source of tense conflict. Both countries are building stuff in
It's taking over now.
the region. Roads, communication towers, airfields, everything to be ready in case a full-blown conflict breaks out. Troops from both sides face each other in a standoff at this line. The line of actual control. That's really what it's called. It loosely marks the border between these two massive countries, a border that was never really agreed upon. Because remember where we are here. We're in the Himalayas, the tallest mountains on Earth. Drawing lines and controlling territory here just doesn't work super well. But both sides want to exert control, even here in the high mountains, especially in these important trade regions. These are two nuclear countries, and so they've agreed to not use firearms up here, no guns. So instead, when conflict breaks out, it looks
Sticks.
more like a medieval battle, with barbed wire wrapped clubs and fence posts. The most recent clash was just in 2020, right here near Ladakh. 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers were killed.
Indian and Chinese soldiers fought on disputed land using stones and bamboo poles, and around 24 people died.
As you go down the border between India and China, there are several more of these pockets of disputed land in the Himalayas. As we head east, we'll hit Nepal, and I have to mention that there was recently a leaked government report out of
Yeah, this is where Mount Everest is, right?
Nepal that asserts that China is encroaching into Nepal's sovereign territory, building stuff with no permission on Nepal's side of the border here in the Humla district. Nepal actually didn't want this report to come out. They have to walk a fine line being sandwiched between these two behemoth countries, and a big part of that means staying on China's good side. A few years ago, I was up here shooting an episode of Vox Borders, and the locals told me that the Chinese military didn't respect the border. They kind of did whatever they wanted, which is why I wasn't even allowed to get up to the border fence between these two countries. It's an eerie feeling, being so close to a country that is so serious about projecting its power to its neighbors. Anyway, let's keep going east, where we'll hit another landlocked country in the Himalayas, Bhutan. The border here continues to make an effort to divide these countries in a rugged, glacier-filled expanse. Back in 2006, China quietly pressured Bhutan to give them this big chunk of mountain territory, and Bhutan conceded. They didn't really have a choice. And so while they kind of keep it hush-hush, China is reminding the world that they actually control this part of Bhutan. It's theirs now. China's using the same playbook in different parts of Bhutan, blurring this northern border as they encroach south. In 2020, China claimed that they actually own this part of Bhutan, a forested nature sanctuary. But strangely, this official map doesn't show that this area is inside of China's borders. Maybe it will next year. The most strategically important part of China's claim on Bhutan is here. This little strip of land gives us a better idea of why China is squeezing the border of this tiny country. If you zoom out, you'll see where we are. Right here at this vital choke point between these two rivals, India and China. This thin corridor where India connects to its eastern states. Some call this the chicken neck. The map asserts that China owns this part of Bhutan, the Doklam Plateau, which provides them a perfect military vantage point over the chicken neck, India's critical corridor. This would make India vulnerable in the case of an active conflict. Oh, and their claim is not just on the map. Satellite imagery analyzed by Reuters shows that China is building roads and settlements and structures on this sovereign territory of Bhutan, enhancing their strategic military position and fortifying their claim on the map.
Yeah, you have steps ahead for the future complex.
These border shenanigans in Bhutan are considered a proxy for tension between China and India. Bhutan, like Nepal, is just sandwiched in the middle.
Satellite images of the Chinese incursions in Bhutan, where China has built roads and barracks on the undisputed territory of Bhutan.
Okay, let's keep moving on. Next to Bhutan, China's map shows that all of this land are within its borders. They now call it South Tibet. But all of this territory belongs to India. It's full of Indian citizens. India's claim to this land relies on this 890-kilometer borderline that a British representative drew in 1913 in partnership with a representative from Tibet who agreed to the line. But China says this isn't legitimate. They own Tibet now, and they never authorized this line dividing Tibet from India. So on their map, they assert that all of this belongs to China. And to take it a step further, they're actually renaming stuff on their maps in this region, from mountain peaks to rivers and cities, showing us how China wants to claim and standardize every corner of its country, exerting control and influence even in these remote places. Now, India is not standing by and letting this happen. To counter this, the Indian government is spending $500 million to build roads and develop hundreds of villages with the goal of solidifying their claim to this land. As we head east, let me mention that during the pandemic, China has been building a fence along this border with Myanmar, mostly to keep people and illicit goods out of China. This border has always been porous. People who share culture and language would cross back and forth, informally trading, but this fence has totally changed that, and people are angry. I've considered doing an entire video on this border fence and how it's disturbing and affecting life here. If that's interesting to you, please let me know in the comments. So while this isn't a disputed territory, it is another example of China's increased effort to tighten its control on every corner of its land. Okay, now we've arrived at the ocean, the part of the map that gets a little wild. The government map actually makes it look simple. All of the water inside of this dashed line is China's, but the reality actually looks like this. This is what's known as the 9-dash line, and it was effectively a hand-drawn boundary by the Chinese government in the 1940s. It's not a precise border. It wasn't agreed upon by the countries here, and nor is it legal, at least according to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, who calls the 9-dash line lawless, because it clearly cuts through the waters that international law says belong to these neighboring countries, and that's how you get this jumble of all these lines. But, as superpowers do, China ignored
other countries.
All of this because they can. And they continue to operate as if this entire ocean, which by the way is replete with fish and fossil fuels, as well as militarily strategic islands and important trade routes, all of it is theirs. This has created active conflicts with neighboring countries because for China, these aren't just lines on a map. China has been pumping sand onto tiny reefs to create islands where there were none. Then, they build a military outpost on these newly created islands. In the last decade, they've built dozens of these outposts throughout the South China Sea. And you can see that these militarized islands are right inside the waters that the world has agreed belong to these other countries. The Chinese Navy also steps in, patrolling these waters and routinely harassing fishermen from other countries, reminding them that China isn't subject to the rules. This is their water, just like their official map says.
The United States is accusing China of harassment.
A Filipino fisherman was chased by Chinese Coast Guard speedboats as he made a dash for the shallow waters of Scarborough Shoal last Friday.
A similar dispute is happening on a group of islands a little north of here, where Japan, China, and Taiwan all claim these islands that are surrounded by oil and gas fields. China will often flex on Japan by sending Coast Guard ships into the water and airspace around these islands. This is their neighborhood, they think these islands are theirs, and they are going to assert that claim, on the map as well as in real life. On China's map, Taiwan is included as a part of China. Even though Taiwan has been independent for decades, China insists that this is theirs. And if push comes to shove, they've made it very clear that they are willing to claim it back by force. And to that end, this new map includes an addition to the 9-dash line, a 10th dash, a line that drifts dangerously north to encircle the water east of Taiwan. This isn't the first time that a 10th dash has appeared on a Chinese government map, but it is a meaningful moment for the government to just slip in another dash. And it's created a big debate about what this actually means. But one thing that almost all experts agree on is that China's ability to just switch up their ocean claim by adding another dash communicates the original message of using
just one dash,
a hand-drawn
it's kind of concerning
line as your maritime claim, which is that China feels historically entitled to this region, to this ocean, and they will behave how they choose in their own neighborhood. Especially at a time when its neighbors are partnering with its geopolitical rival, the United States, to surround and encircle China with a large military buildup in the region. The last one I'll mention is a tiny one that's kind of surprising. It's up here where the map claims this river island that should belong to Russia. There was a dispute about this, but 20 years ago, Russia and China agreed to redraw the border like this, giving half of this island back to Russia. But in this map, they claim it once again, and no one is totally sure why. So this new map out of China is a series of political statements, which arguably every map is. Some of these are worthy of debate, some are wishful thinking, and some are downright aggressive. But one thing is clear, China is now rich and powerful, and motivated to exert its geopolitical vision in the world. It's a reminder that maps have always been a tool for great powers to express their aspirations. And this map, in this modern day, is no different.
Yeah, and actually taking over. That's pretty good video, I guess. They're just trying to do something or start something there.